Our next speaker is Johnny Johnson. He enlisted with the U.S. Navy when he was only 17 years old. He experienced and survived the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. He later founded the nonprofit USS San Francisco Memorial Foundation, which conducts the annual memorial ceremony at Land's End in San Francisco to honor the 107 sailors and Marines killed in action aboard the USS San Francisco. Please welcome Chief Johnny Johnson.
Thank you, and I hope that everybody can hear me. Am I talking good? I'll speak. I'm so thrilled to be here and share a little bit of history with you, and my history is most of it in my head. Consequently, the Philippines is a very, very important part of the world today. But let's go back just a little bit, and I explain to you a couple things. And as I do, let me make another point here, and that is the people of Japan were slaves to the military in Japan. We must never forget that. They were just slaves. The military ran all of the world in Japan and all the countries that they conquered and went after, and one, of course, is the Philippines. But the people in Japan today are just wonderful, wonderful people, as they are in all of Asia, and of course in San Francisco with you all here today. Now that said, let me move back just a little bit more. I recall an incident, and I'm going to share this, and I'll speak back a little bit, some other history, and that is the USS San Francisco. It's a heavy cruiser, the USS San Francisco, heavy cruiser. It has 17 barrels of cannon. They didn't have cannonballs, they had projectiles, 17 of them. So it was a pretty, and 1,000 men and me. So I was just a kid. They all were. During the Battle of Guadalcanal, 1942, the average age was 19 of all people aboard the San Francisco. That was during the second part of the war. Pearl Harbor was the first part, and of course when Pearl Harbor happened, it also took place in the Philippines and all of Manila. Now then, so I go from there. So one day, toward the end of the war, the San Francisco pulled in to Manila. And I wasn't quite sure what was going on, but it looked very interesting because all the hills were pretty and the greenery and so on. We've been at sea so long. 5 years was my home. For 5 years, one ship. But anyway, so into Manila, and we pulled into Manila. I could not believe what I saw. I'll share with you a little bit of that. All the hills, all the city was rubble, and I mean real rubble. There was nothing that looked like it was livable. And we were there shortly after the war ended, shortly at that time. And Japan had surrendered in the Philippines, and this was the cleanup, you might say. And the big San Francisco looks like a huge battleship. And it is pretty big, but not as big as the bigger one. But nonetheless, those barrels and the ship came along and docked right downtown Manila. And that was to tell Manila, we are here and we have won the war with your help and everything else. Isn't that amazing? And that battlegrounds around there was just every place I walked was rubble and mountains and of junk, houses bombed, so on. And there was one city in the world that was almost the same thing, and that was Cologne in Germany, heavily, heavily bombed. This particular place happened to be bombed so heavily in Manila because at that time the war was coming to an end, and America had developed more and more activities. And Ulithia was an island off from Guam, and that was the big airfield for American bombers. Most of them was bombing Tokyo. But they also included Manila because that's where all the Japanese were. They commanded Manila. And that's the reason that Manila was so destroyed, is because it was to get the Japanese out of there. I'm talking about the military, not the people. And they had then been successful. And we had a big show. And then I'll go back and I'll say there was something else that happened shortly after that, and then I have some few more things to share with you. And that is we pulled around out of Manila into Subic Bay. Oh my gosh, Subic Bay, we've been there before 4 or 5 times, and Subic Bay is a beautiful, beautiful bay, probably the best in the world, at least one of the best in Asia. It's large, it's deep, all kinds of ships can pull in there to do whatever activities that they want to do, which is mostly we were there to get groceries out of a supply ship, to get ammunition off an ammunition ship, and get oil off an oil tanker. So it was in and out during that part of the war in the Pacific. Now then, how did this all happen? Well, let me go back and say something in reminding this. 3 years from Pearl Harbor, 3 years, and remember that's a couple days later, Philippines. 3 years, 8 months, and 8 days later, Japan signed unconditional surrender. How in the world did that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happened. The American women went to work, and all the Filipinos in America helped them. And that was, God bless them all, because they produced airplanes, ships, and everything that we boys needed. And that made the war successful. And I'll tell you a little bit more, too. As a young kid, I grew up in Minnesota during the Depression years. And everybody around there had farms. Most of the farms, because of the Depression, they went broke. That meant there's a lot of machinery out in the yards that had rusting away. And every once in a while, somebody would come and want to buy that stuff for pennies and small pennies and so on. And everybody was happy to sell all the old junk. And one day I asked this man, a whole truckload, I said, what are you going to do with all of this junk? To me, it was just junk. He says, we're going to send it to Japan. Well, I didn't know that was part of them making all of the ships and the war material that they needed, because they needed our machinery to be recycled into a war. Anyway, here comes one of my great friends. So now that's the way the war goes, and now as a result of that, I grew up and joined the Navy in Pearl Harbor and from there on, and I will conclude with this, and I'm so honored to be here, and I see the flag of America, which is my flag, and the flag of the Philippines, which is my flag, and the Philippines is part of America and always will be, because we're married together. Thank you for my time and attention.
Thank you very much, Chief Johnny Johnson.